Welcome back to the 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show. My name is Wayne Kimmel, managing partner of 76 Capital, the sports tech venture capital company. On this show, I interview top sports entrepreneurs, athletes, and executives who are truly shaping and many times changing the overall sports industry. Today, we're going to talk sports betting and much, much more with my special guest, Ezra Kucharz, the Chief Business Officer at DraftKings. And make sure you follow Ezra on Twitter at @eKucharz. Ezra, welcome to our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
Wayne, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a big fan of this show, and I watch and listen all the time, and really excited to be here. I'm glad to finally be called up to the big leagues to do this thing, so I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show, and our whole team at 76 Capital, was really excited about this. And just a few weeks ago, we had the great Brent Musburger on our show, and it was great to kind of flip the mic on him and ask him questions. And as you know, Brent was one of the founders with Brian Musburger of VSiN, the company that we were investors in and you acquired back in 2021. That was a really exciting moment for us and hopefully for you guys as well. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that deal and where things are going in the future of VSiN.
We're really excited about this acquisition. It's been fun, and we've done some amazing things, and it's been foundational in our really getting moving in a media business. And it's been one of those things where it's allowed us to go faster, and the quality of the content's amazing. And so I think, as you move forward in the coming months and years, you'll see some other new and interesting things we decide to do with VSiN and in the media space. So we're really excited to have them as part of the family.
Well, that's great to hear. And, we were so excited to do that. And it was, we'll get into a little of this later in our conversation, but it was great. Another one of the board members with me at VSiN was Dan Mason. Your background working with Dan back at CBS must have been fun putting that all together.
Yeah, look, I love Dan. Dan, I had an interesting situation when I was at CBS. I had 3 bosses, and Dan was one of the 3 of them for a while. And I love Dan. Dan's been a great friend and mentor for years. And, Dan is always trying to stay, ahead of the curve and come up with new and exciting things in the media space. So it's always great to kind of be in and around Dan and everything he's working on.
So at DraftKings, as the chief business officer there, you're responsible for a lot of the big deals and the big things that are happening over there. And I've heard you and Jason and talk about you guys wanting to be the Amazon of sports. Can you share with us what that means?
So when you look at sports fans, there's lots of different ways that they spend money, right? And right now we touch on a few of those things, right? We have a very large and sizable daily fantasy sports business that's been around for a while, and it does really well for us. We have a sports betting business that is live in 18 states and is continuing to grow. We added 3 states this past year, or I should say this recently. And, we have a iGaming business, that's in fewer states, but, great casino games. And then we've launched, an NFT marketplace that is at its early stages, and it's been a lot of fun. And then a media business, which, we mentioned earlier, VSiN's been kind of one of the anchor or foundational pieces of it. And, when you think about sports fans, they have a lot of different things they do. And so as we approach the marketplace, we want to be a place where sports fans can, have a little fun, and the entertainment value of kind of playing daily fantasy sports or sports betting or iGaming and NFTs and media. So the idea is really, to, help fans who, love having skin in the game. And, it's that sports fan experience that's not lean back, it's lean forward, right? And it makes things more engaging and more exciting. And so we intend on, continuing to do new and innovative things to help grow, fan engagement as well as, revenues for our business.
I think one of the things that's interesting about what you're doing at DraftKings is really helping to mainstream sports betting and bringing into the regulated markets and doing it the right way. And talk a little bit about that in the sense that where do you sort of feel where we are within the industry? I mean, a lot there's this sense from us. I'll sort of use the opinion at 76 Capital here. Like we truly believe we're at the very, very early stages of this overall industry. And there's so much opportunity for new innovation and new opportunities and new ways to really build the overall sports betting business. Where do you guys feel you are right now?
Oh, I think it's really early, right? I think it's really early in the industry here in this country. And I think, there's an exciting time to come where we're in the early stages of this, where there's going to be product innovation. There's going to be innovation in fan engagement. I think you're starting to see broadcasters get a little bit more comfortable in doing some more interesting things and engage fans more. And at the end of the day, this is about sports fans kind of staying engaged and having that lean forward experience. So you're just starting to see some really cool, product innovation, whether it's micro betting, live betting, the guys at Simple Bet do a really great job and we work with them. And, there's a whole bunch of, other things that are coming that, will, allow fans to get as involved as they want to or don't want to, right? If you want to have a lean back experience and just watch, you can. But if you're somebody who loves competition and wants to kind of lean forward, I think that's going to be here as well.
On a personal level, I mean, it must have been, really unbelievable for you to see, being involved in the media business in the sports world and sort of seeing how sports betting has gotten so much integrated into the overall business. I mean, I remember, I was talking to someone the other day and I was telling him about, back in 2018, David Purdom from ESPN said, asked me, what I thought was going to look like, the future was going to look like. And I said, there are going to be tickers out there on Times Square where you're going to see the lines right underneath the NASDAQ stocks, the stock prices. And at that point, he was like, are you sure you want me to print that? That's kind of crazy. You really think it's going to be that much out there? And now, we see now, live, sports betting in over 30 states, as we talked about earlier, and the growth of this. I mean, is this surprising to you as someone who's so involved that things have moved so quickly, but we're still so early in the industry?
It's I have the benefit of many years. I'm old, and having experienced this, I can think back to I think it was 1979 or 1980 ESPN launches with a sports cable network, right? And then you kind of fast forward to 1995. I believe it was 95. You have this second wave where this thing called Satchel Sports launches and Total Sports, which was my company, launches, and Satchel Sports eventually became ESPN Zone and ESPN.com eventually. And, she had that second wave where, it became about the web and audio streaming, Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner at initially called AudioNet and then became broadcast.com was also around that same time. And then, when apps started coming, that was kind of the next wave, right? You had this app infrastructure. And, eventually the next phase has been sports betting, right? And really kind of seen this wave. And now there's like a new wave around, call it Web3, NFTs, tokenization, which will kind of touch on everything. But the thing that you see across all these things is it's innovation occurring in products across sports. And it's really been going on now for about 25 years, right? If you don't include the launch of ESPN broadcast, right? if you include ESPN broadcast, it's been about 40 years, and so what's happening is you tend to see trends in tech and products usually happen first in sports, right? Sports fans tend to be the most ravenous, most loyal, most engaged. So you're starting to see these things kind of play out over time, and it comes in one wave after another. You don't typically have two or three things on top of each other. There's usually a little bit of spacing. Right now is an interesting time because you got betting, and then you've got kind of the tokenization or inclusion of different types of crypto, specifically on NFTs coming in. And so I think we're still at the very early stages, and you go, I don't know, 10 years in the future, I think your viewing experience at home is going to be very different than it is today, and it's going to be a very gamified experience where you can do a lot of things while you're watching a game.
Can you share with us, what you're at DraftKings right now, what the NFT strategy is, and what you're doing at this time?
Yeah, we launched a marketplace last year. It's been a marketplace that we have curated with our partners at Autograph. Very, very specific, NFTs that are released periodically within the marketplace. People can come in and they can resell it, and within our marketplace. And what I would say to you is, I think we have some interesting things coming up in the next call it 6 months. I'm not going to actually share them today because it'll ruin the surprises. But the idea is we've bought in, and you've seen our announcement with the NFLPA, right? We're going to have a tokenized DFS style game that'll be done in conjunction with the NFLPA, and we're really excited about that. And so lots of interesting things, and it's a lot of fun.
How does it work? I mean, how do you balance the huge fantasy business that DraftKings had, and now the sports betting side of things? How do those worlds work for you and the team at DraftKings?
I think it's a different use case, right? And I think people that like playing fantasy sports continue to like playing fantasy sports. Like, I'm in some private leagues with some friends, and I enjoy beating them most weekends. Some weekends not so much, but it's a much different user experience than me playing a bet against the house. And the other thing you have to remember is, if you're playing in like public daily fantasy games, like, you can enter a contest for as little as 25 cents usually, but let's say $1 or $10, and you can win $1 million, right? If you're betting $10 on I'll pick on the Sixers because I know you're down in Philly, on the Sixers to win, you're probably not going to win $1 million. You're probably going to win like 15. And it's just a different use case, and both are fun. Both have different kind of skin in the game perspectives. But I enjoy them both, right? And I don't think neither is going away, right? It's just a different set of it's a different opportunity and use case for consumers.
So I've read a lot of articles, even some books about and fortunately I've gotten to know your partners at DraftKings and Jason and your team there. What is it like working with Jason and Paul and Matt and the rest of your team? I mean, tell us about these guys. I mean, they were true pioneers from the DFS perspective, and now you guys are out there as certainly one of the leaders in the world of sports betting today. Tell us about these guys.
So I don't say this lightly, what I'm about to say. This is the smartest group of individuals I've ever worked with, and I worked for NASA for a while. I think you know. And when I got out of the Army, I was a mission controller for about 4 years. And this by far is the smartest group of individuals I've ever worked with. They're also very, very like strategic in their thinking, and as a company, we're biased for action, right? We try to go out and seize opportunities, and working with these guys has been amazing. And what I love about it is I learn something every day, and I don't say that like in a kind of cavalier, cliche sort of way. I literally do learn something every day, and you have to be thinking about things, from a growth mindset. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, and it's hard, right? Like it's not for everybody, right? There are people that come from legacy businesses that have a certain pace and a certain culture that DraftKings isn't that, right? We have a challenge culture, and it's one of the great things is anyone and everyone can challenge kind of what we're working on, and it's got to be done in a way that it's a challenge, not a confrontation, which is a very subtle point. But our founders are amazing guys, and they are really good at looking at a situation and understanding it really quickly, and then formulating a response, and then we move forward, right? And that can be everything from how do we approach a new sport to how do we partner with somebody. So they're great. It's been fun.
What made you personally take the leap to go from a big company like CBS to jump in with these founders?
So it's interesting. I was I ran a division at CBS. I was reporting to Les Moonves, and when the decision was made to sell CBS Radio to Entercom, which is now I think called Odyssey, I went to Les and I just had like a frank discussion with him. Right, it was approximately 2/3 of my portfolio that we were going to sell. And I just said to him, I was like, look, it's probably time for me to go. I don't really necessarily want to work in local TV, nothing against local TV, but 2/3 of my portfolio was going to end up leaving the company eventually. And, I'd done well at CBS, and I was thinking I wanted to go back to being an entrepreneur. And, I left about a year later. Like I spent a year working for Les and Joe, at the corporate level. And, I left about a year later and was doing some consulting. And I was fishing one day, and I said to my wife, I was like, I think I need to go back to work. Like I'm an operator at my core. And I knew some of the board members at DraftKings. DraftKings was one of my large clients at CBS. Had a cup of coffee with Jason. Then, proceeded to interview for like the next month, and then a month later, I was there, and no regrets. I've kind of managed my career like Forrest Gump. There's no master plan, right? I just work hard, try to do the right things always, and what ends up happening is opportunities pop up, and it's not because I'm I got to be honest with you. I can't tell you the last time I looked for a job, right? Like usually people have approached me and, and asked me would I be interested in, leaving wherever I had been to go somewhere else. And coming to DraftKings was like kind of the first time in a very, very long time I reached out to somebody saying, hey, I'm thinking about leaving. Or in that case, I'm thinking about, getting off the sideline and going back in. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Well, you talked about how the founders and Jason, you learn something new every day from these guys, but what are some of the character traits that they have, or some of the things that as entrepreneurs, because a lot of times on our show, we'll talk about, to entrepreneurs who are creating businesses and wanting to be the next Jason Robbins. They look at him, oh my God, I want to be that guy. What are some of the things that he does that are so special and magical that have been able to create what DraftKings is today?
So, his problem solving and analytical skills, they're fantastic. They're unbelievable, right? I've never seen anything like it. And one of the things I love about him that he's like me is he's relentless, right? And when we want to go do something, we figure out a way to go do it, right? And we are that challenge culture is amazing, right? It is one of those things where we do what's right for the company always. And, when people say, oh, well, I want to be like Jason Robbins, right? It's like, there's only one Jason Robbins, right? But, it is somebody who, his quantitative and analytical skills are second to none. He's a great people person, both inside and outside the company. We are, as a company, biased for action. So, other people, you'd call it relentless. And it is, it's exciting and fun.
So, we all are hopefully now getting to the end of this global pandemic, and man, it was tough for everybody. And I think that, you and the other sports betting operators were rolling out your business in the midst of all this, like literally starting to put, open up mobile on the mobile side as well as on the physical side, all across the country in the middle of this crazy pandemic, and where you weren't able to even be in the same offices many times as having the whole leadership team together to be able to do this. What was that experience like, and how did you guys get it done?
So, the other things you didn't mention, which are really important, is we went public during this, and we did a couple offerings in the middle of all this, right? Like we've made some pretty large acquisitions in the middle of all this. So So
how did you do all this? It's unbelievable.
It took a lot, or it takes. We're still not out of it yet, but we're getting close. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a ton of communication, right? Like, because we're scattered all over the place, right? Like I live outside New York. The company's headquartered in Boston, but people still aren't going to the office. So I could be in Timbuktu as long as I can be, on a Zoom. And so we've just been super deliberate in kind of our approach. And we are very clear in our communication, and we try to keep people engaged, that aren't maybe necessarily in the same place that we are. And it's worked. Don't get me wrong. I think people are ready to go back to the office, right? I think people are a little, have a little bit of Zoom fatigue. I certainly do. And I think it's just one of those things where companies that decided early on that this might be the new normal for a while and really focused in on how to operate in this type of environment have done well, right? Groups that have just kind of taken a cavalier approach haven't. And I'm proud and I'm happy to say we've adapted, and we are a great organization today. We're much larger than we were, when we came into the pandemic, and we've managed to onboard hundreds of people without actually going to the office.
That's amazing. I mean, one of the individuals I think is fascinating that I remember when he joined your team was Johnny Avello. And, a guy who was a legendary sports book, bookmaker, joining the upstart digital technology first, DraftKings. What was that like, bringing someone like that onto your team?
I love Johnny. Johnny's a good friend, and Johnny, you're right, is a legend in this industry, right? He was the, when people talked about like guys that ran these major books in Vegas, he was one of the guys that people would talk about. So for me, I early on, and I still do, but early on, I spent a ton of time with him. Why? Like I'm a media and tech exec, right? Like I happen to have a bunch of engineering degrees, so I'm good with quant. I spent a ton of time with him, just kind of learning the way he's operated for decades, and just getting smarter about stuff. And every time I get to, I spend a little bit of time with him during Super Bowl weekend in LA, and even there, I learned something. And it's one of those things where he has been, a mentor, a friend, and a colleague. And you can't ask for anything more. And he's been that way for many, many people within the company.
Now, I have to ask, your opinion on what's happened, so far in New York, and how with mobile sports betting opening up in New York, and do the over $2 billion wagered in the first couple of weeks, is that surprising to you, or is that what you and the team DraftKings had expected?
So, I'm looking down at some notes here. I'm going to just give you some factoids. It's been great, right? So in the first 24 hours, it took us 24 hours to acquire 100,000 first-time bettors in New York, compared to 17 days in Arizona, 170 days in New Jersey, 312 days in Pennsylvania, and 344 days in Indiana. So you can tell it's pretty good. I think we're in the early stages of this thing, right? We like where it's going. I think that, I think we would be able to do more in the state if the tax rate was lower. But, one thing at a time. Right now, we're engaging fans. They're excited. They're having a good time. And, that's what's important.
Well, New York, one of the big ones, right? Massachusetts has yet to go, right? Florida, Texas, California. I know that you and many other operators are working in all different ways to try to open up some of these different states. And, I think it's just, it's going to be unbelievable to see what happens next. And, let's just, you look out the next couple of years, where do you see this all going? How, will we be at a place where it's over 40, 45 states that have sports betting? Where do you when you project out, what do you think it's going to look like?
So I typically don't do projections, because trying to predict what the government's going to do in local state governments is really hard. And it's really it's a tough situation to kind of say, like, I think this state or that state's going to go, right? What I will say is it benefits states in so many different ways, right? But first and foremost, the tax revenue that can come in and, help whatever programs they put it against, whether it's education, homelessness, or whatever, are great for the state. The other thing is the consumer demand is there, right? Consumers want this. And, it is one of those things where you think that in the coming years that, many more states will come, never goes as fast as we hope, but, this has been, it's a pretty good start.
Absolutely. One of the things I always use this example of the DraftKings ad at Lincoln Financial Field at the Eagles games. I loved your ad because it said, DraftKings, bet in your seat. And when I first saw it, it was like, yeah, well, of course you can bet in your seat on your phone. But I think for many, many people still, it's like, I can engage in the game. I can bet on my favorite player, my favorite team, and do that, from your seat in the stadium. This is not the way that you and I grew up. That wasn't how you did things. We won't talk about how some of the I'll talk about myself, how I used to bet, but I mean, the same way, but now it's like you can actually do it in a regulated, safe fashion in your seat on mobile. I mean, these are the types of things that I think that are still not 100% in the minds of the consumers, especially, and sports fans in general.
Look, I think there's still just a very small fraction of the population that's engaging in it, right? I think there's much more to come. And you're right. I think people at times forget their phone works everywhere. And, I have 2 teenagers, and I certainly see the phone works everywhere because they're on social media at all times, no matter what's going on. But all joking aside, I think it's about the entertainment value of what we're doing, right? We can make, like, when games get silly, right? When the Eagles are beating somebody by 40 points, right, which happens every week.
Oh, man, we wish. Right?
I think that, some people might get a little bored watching the broadcast or being in the stadium. In-game betting keeps them engaged, right? So I think we're at the early stages of this, and over time, you'll have more and more of the population doing it.
Well, as we start to wrap up our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show, it's really, first of all, thank you for joining us. It's been really great having you on the show. But I got to ask you a couple more things, and we were able to touch on a little bit of your background. I mean, working at NASA. I had to ask you, like, what was that like, and how did you end up working at NASA?
So I had just gotten off active duty in the Army in the fall of '90. And what was crazy about it is Iraq had invaded Kuwait. And so I was on alert to go over, but I was ready to start my civilian job at NASA. So I went down I had a professor from undergrad introduce me to somebody, and I was a medical mission controller. And so I had somebody from undergrad, one of the professors, introduce me to the person that runs that program at NASA. In complete transparency, I was a horrible student as an undergrad. I was asked to leave Boston University at one point. I said no. But long story short, I guess I interviewed well, and I got the job, right? And, I eventually worked my way up there in 4 years, where I became the head of all medical training that astronauts get. And I have some great photos and stories of, like, training the cosmonauts that eventually, when the space shuttle docked with the Mir space station in, I think, 1995, I was training the crew in 1994. And, it was an amazing time and fun. But, this is like, one of those things where, eventually, it's a government job, and I think my 4th year there I was making like $36,000 a year. And I decided to go off to Duke to go get a PhD in biomedical engineering. And while I was there, I started a business, a sports media business, and I haven't looked back since. So kind of it's one of those great jobs. I still have a ton of friends there that are, it's always interesting when you're young and working somewhere, and then eventually the people you start working with at the same time now are the senior leaders in NASA. It's kind of funny. So
NASA, Duke, Total Sports. How what made you go create that business?
So I ended up at Duke in 1994, and I was doing my PhD research in this new thing called the World Wide Web, and it was like how the World Wide Web, is used in medicine. And literally, I had a buddy that was in grad school at the same time as me, and I casually mentioned it to him. I wish I could do in sports what I'm doing in medicine. And that buddy's name is Quinn Snyder. He's the head coach of the Utah Jazz right now. He was a grad assistant on the Duke team. He was working on his JD MBA. Next thing I know, like 2 weeks later, I'm in Coach K's office explaining to him what the World Wide Web is, that he needed to be on it, the athletic department needed to be on it. And, long story short, I started a business. The athletic department and coach hired that business. And, we built websites for universities and newspapers. We built the sports sections of those newspapers. And we grew that into a fairly large business, and we sold it in late 2000 we sold it to some guys, and probably the wrong guys, but that doesn't matter. I learned a lot, and that's how I got in the media business. It's all by accident.
Do you have a similar feeling? Because we have a kind of a similar background in being in the tech world in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I always say I have a similar feeling about what was happening at that time and now what's happening within the sports tech and sports business industry, because of how much innovation is occurring in and around the world of sports today, whether it's sports betting and just the overall tech side of things. Do you feel there's a similar thing happening here with sports as to what was happening at the time when the internet was first happening?
Yeah, no, I think it's very similar right now. I think the only difference is I think sports organizations, athletes, brands are much better at managing their IP than they were, 25 years ago. 25 years ago, certain organizations, teams, leagues, brands, whatever, wouldn't manage their IP as tightly as they are today. And that's not a negative, right? It's just, people have IP and, they own it, and they should. And so I think every 10 years or 15 years, you and I can come back here and we'll be saying the same thing, right? There'll be some sort of new technology, new product that'll be leveraging these great brands.
We talk about tech, and as we start to wrap up here, a couple quick questions I wanted to ask you. There's the world of sports. The tech players are just now really starting to show their cards and starting to move into the world of sports in a big way. What do you think is going to be we talked about, you don't love projections that much, but do you think any of the big tech players out there will really do something big this year in the world of sports in 2022?
I think they already are, right? I think they all, what is it? Amazon has got Thursday Night Football and some other things. And, I think Apple is kind of always rumored to be doing things. Facebook, I'm not sure that they believe in sports other than fandom, which is okay. They did do some live broadcasts, I think, 2 years ago, and I'm not sure they're continuing that program. So I think, big tech is looking at sports and trying to figure out, if you think about big tech, for the most part, it's a direct response business. Sports tends not to be a direct response business. It's more of a brand and affinity business. And I think big tech is just trying to figure out that balance. That's at least my prediction.
Well, look, again, thank you so much for joining us on this show. The last thing I have to ask you is, your relationship with Coach K and relationship with Duke. It's unbelievable. This is his last season, and how do you feel about that? And you guys going to bring Coach K over to DraftKings next, or what's
no, no. You know what? I think Coach is going to go retire. I haven't spoken to him about it. What I would say is, he's a guy, when you think about it, and it seems so simple back then, by just giving me a chance, he changed my life. Right? It'd probably be like a professor somewhere teaching, biomedical engineering or maybe back in NASA. And, he changed my life by giving me this chance, he and Mrs. K. And, I think, I'll certainly be at his last game at Cameron. It's the Duke UNC game, March 5th. Really excited to be there. But it's, it's a changing of a guard, right? It is something that always eventually happens. And, I think that, he and his family made a decision, and it's definitely the right decision for him. And so I look forward to, his last game at Cameron, and then, seeing Coach Shire, step in and, take the reins for the future seasons.
Well, Ezra, thank you so much. Again, Ezra Kucharz, Chief Business Officer of DraftKings. Thank you so much for joining us on our 76 Capital Sports Leadership Show.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to catching up soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again.